So not too long ago on Steam came a bit of a surprise to a lot of us that play a lot of action RPGs, and that surprise was a pleasant one by the name of Titan Quest Anniversary Edition, something that pretty much no one was expecting. And although I wouldn't say no one was asking for, necessarily, just no one really thought of the possibility of. So, out of nowhere, more or less, the Anniversary Edition of Titan Quest was released to pretty great reviews and pretty great praise. And it just sort of plopped down out of nowhere. And I would like to show you what it is and kind of talk about what actually happened and where it came from. So, Titan Quest, the original, actually came out, if nobody knows, came out in 2006, 10 full years ago, which in gaming terms is quite a long time, actually. And it was a very good action RPG that had a pretty, I wouldn't necessarily say cult following, but it had a relatively good sized but not massively mainstream following of fans. And it was successful but not hugely so, because a lot of people by this time were looking for more ARPGs to play, because people had kind of had their fill of the Diablo 2 experience, and the mods were getting rolling for Diablo 2 by this point pretty heavily. But there weren't other full game options available in like a large number at this point. Like we see today, actually, there are, a very good number of ARPGs available now, but the market wasn't in that condition at this point. And in 2006, along came a company called Iron Lore, and they decided to make a mythologically themed action RPG by the name of Titan Quest, and it was a pretty good success because it had a really nice theme going on. I mean, everyone loves Greek mythology. It's really cool, especially when it's really well done. And this puts you right in the middle of it. And not only was it Greek mythology themed, but every act of the game was actually different. And in this case, I'm actually in Act 2, which, I mean, every Act 2, for some reason, of every action RPG, for some reason, has to be a desert. I don't know why that is, but that's just every ARPG. It's like a law. And of course, what better mythological desert than Egypt? So, Act 2 is Egypt, and Egyptian mythology themed. And the entire game goes on like this, and puts you right in the middle of various myths and legends, and lets you fight up to, like, gods and titans, basically. And it has a pretty great storyline that focuses on some really weird, kind of non-standard myths going wrong style of stuff, with, like, a mixing of multiple worlds myths coming together, and it's a pretty cool little game. I say little, it's actually pretty long. It's got quite a lot of content. And it was well received for these reasons. And the gameplay itself is, as you're probably seeing in the background here, a lot of fun. It's a very good action RPG with a lot of options for character building. It's got a good amount of variety in what you can actually do with your character. You have, it's got what's called the Mastery system, where you, from level 2, are allowed to choose a Mastery. And every mastery has a multitude of active and passive skills to choose from. And then, again, at level 8, if you wish, although you're not forced to, you can then choose another mastery to couple with and hopefully synergize well with the first one you chose, allowing you to create a sort of unique build. And if you want, you can, of course, just focus on a primary mastery throughout the game. Or you can choose and combine two. And this character is an Elementalist, which is a combination of the Storm and Earth Mastery. Although, currently, I'm only using Storm Mastery abilities, because I'm waiting a bit to go into Earth until I can get a lot more points put into it, because I'm not interested in the early Earth skills on this character, although I do like them. There are lots of combinations, and I'll show you that in a moment. But what ended up happening was, of course, THQ published Titan Quest, And we all know what happened to THQ. Unfortunately, they went under, and a lot of their holdings, their IPs, were auctioned off. And Titan Quest was one of them. And Titan Quest was one of those games that, during the, recent HD remake craze we've been having, a lot of people have kind of mentioned Titan Quest in passing as like a, hey, that game could really use, another look. But it never really, no one ever said, we really need one, and it was never taken as a serious, please HD remake Titan Quest. But, certain companies, no names, know what they're doing. And Nordic Games back in 2014 acquired a lot of THQ's holdings. And at that point, they actually changed their name to THQNordic, and decided to sort of take on the mantle. Actually, not at that point. In 2014, they acquired a bunch of THQ's holdings, but they didn't change their name until this year. My bad, I forgot. And in this year, they decided it would be best to change the name to THQNordic and sort of take up the mantle of a bunch of THQ's older games and start redoing their games, start remastering them, or start kind of fixing them, putting up the services again, things like that. And Titan Quest was on their list, and it turns out that they've been working on the Anniversary Edition update or re-release for Titan Quest, and this is it. It sort of came out to I wouldn't say no fanfare, because people were like, oh my god, Titan Quest is back, holy crap, I haven't played that in 5 years. But people were just suddenly interested again, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. So, what's been done to Titan Quest these 10 years? Well, the Anniversary Edition, first of all, combines Titan Quest and its expansion, Immortal Throne. Immortal Throne, for those of you who don't remember or don't know, was a actually really quite good expansion pack to Titan Quest. It added another mastery tree for your characters to go into called Dream, which is massively overpowered, or at least it was when it was first released, and allowed you to literally sleepwalk through the entire game, and was a lot of fun. And it added some new chapters, a bunch of new items, new set items, and just all kinds of new stuff, really. It was comparable to a lot of the CRPG expansions back in the day, like Throne of Ball for Baldur's Gate, and the Neverwinter Nights expansions, things like that. It was in the same vein, in terms of the amount of content and the type of content that it offered. But the Anniversary Edition decides to combine all of that into one package, which first of all is really, really nice. You're paying one price and installing one thing, but you get both. It also helps to fix a lot of the unfortunate problems that come along with having a game that's, let's be honest, 10 years old. And one of those problems was the game didn't always work all that well with modern resolutions. It didn't support a lot of widescreen resolutions without mods or weird interface stretching and things like that. Now, however, it totally does. I'm running this natively in 1920 by 1080 just fine, and the options menu has been updated to reflect that. You can run it in all kinds of more modern widescreen resolutions now without any problems, which is great. The zoom levels have been altered because, of course, the amount you can zoom in and out was reflective of smaller resolutions available in 2006, and you didn't need to be able to zoom out and see as much of the screen because there wasn't as much of a screen to see back then. But now there is, and it was one of the more annoying parts of playing the game again on a higher resolution, was not being able to see as much of the screen or having bits of the UI get cut off and item descriptions get cut off and things like that. But now you can, you have a lot more freedom in the camera movement and things like that. And obviously, as you can see, the scenery does phase in and out and become transparent when you move in front of it very responsively, depending on your zoom level, in a much more responsive to your current resolution in a more modern way, which is nice and very appreciated by modern gamers, I feel. You also have a better UI scaling option, because of course, with less modern resolutions came a problem of either the interface being so small that you could barely read it, and the text was very, very small item descriptions, which of course you're going to be looking at a lot. This is an RPG, after all, so you're going to be comparing numbers for like half the game. They were so small that you could barely read them sometimes in the older version on like a large monitor, or you had the opposite problem, like I said earlier, where the resolution meant that it would cut off portions of the screen and you would miss like item descriptions partially and things like that. That's no longer a problem, as you can see. Everything looks fine. The descriptions don't get cut off, the screen looks fine, and you even have a nice slider and options in the menu that allow you to customize what kind of scaling that you actually use. So you can actually alter the amount of UI scaling depending on what your resolution is and what size of monitor you have, which is a nice modern option, of course, but that you wouldn't expect to see in a game that's 10 plus years old. And it wasn't in a game that was 10 plus years old. It didn't exist in the original version of Titan Quest. That was not an option that you could use. So it's very nice of them to put it in there, and that's, I mean, honestly, if I'm going to say something about things like HD remakes and things like that we seem to have a bit of an obsession with recently, one of the things about really good games is that the gameplay tends to hold up a lot, and that's very much the case in this. In the case of Titan Quest, the gameplay is fine, and oftentimes there's not a lot that needs to be done with the gameplay itself, but interface design, UI elements, resolution options, options menus in general, things like that, the way that you as the player interface with the game, those are the things that tend to need work. And oftentimes those are things that are kind of forgotten and left by the wayside in HD remakes, which is kind of backwards to me, because that's like the thing that should be focused on, in my opinion. And THQNordic has done the right thing with this release, and has, I mean, they're not really calling it an HD remake, it's just an Anniversary Edition update, but it is essentially, for all intents and purposes, the right way to do an HD re-release for a game, in my opinion. Because that's, I mean, let's be honest, that's what it is. It's a re-release of an old title with HD options, basically, and there's a cat in the background. Hello! But they've actually done it right. And, the gameplay itself still holds up just fine. It's still Titan Quest. Titan Quest is an excellent action RPG with really good mythological elements, a really robust character building system, and a ton of equipment and item variety, and it still has that to this day, and it works just fine. However, you'll find that a lot of the quirks and issues that come along with a game being 10 years old are now solved by this version, and that is one thing that a lot of HD remakes tend to fail at actually solving, and I'm really glad to see that they took that to heart and actually fixed those problems with this version. You also have multiple interfaces to choose from. There are two of them. You may notice that, you know, if you've recently played or seen or just remember Titan Quest very well, that this is not actually what the original UI for Titan Quest looked like. You know, you didn't have your health bar down here and your mana bar over here and things like that. It looked a bit different. Your health and mana were actually up here, and this menu wasn't here at all. That's because they put in a different, sort of more modern looking, but still in this style of Titan Quest UI that you can use, that I actually really like the look of. But you don't have to use it if you don't want to. So if I just go to the options menu here, and go to, video, and go to HUD style, I can choose this, and there you go. It switches it back to the original vanilla Titan Quest version. This is what the game actually looked like in 2006. But if you want to use the new version, you can just switch it over, and there you go. Easy as that. And there are also lots of other quality of life improvements that you'll see in there, one of which you may have seen me using in this video is the new quick loot option. There's a single button now that can be used that really helps with the game. Previously you had to click individually on every piece of loot that you wanted. Now there is a single button that you can bind that allows you to quick loot everything within a small radius of you that is either gold, potions, or relic pieces and monster shards. Oh god, the sand wraiths, I forgot about these guys. These guys suck. So, a single button that allows you to auto-loot every sort of consumable or gold or relic shard and things like that near you, that's nice. That's a very appreciated feature. Also, they've done some very impressive work with the balance. They've actually, it's not just that they've brought the game, like, working back to its working state, they've also altered the balance. They have changed all of the masteries, and I do mean all of them. There are 9 right now. And they have changed the balance in all of them. So, even if you have played the game recently, you'll find the game to be a bit of a different experience now, because the skills feel a bit different, the balance of them all is different, and although that does mean they have fixed some exploitable issues, like, you know, being able to pump points into certain skills and make them massively overpowered, cough cough, dream skill, skill trees, you can now find a more balanced experience, and I appreciate that. I don't know, I don't mind. And I think it's cool that they've actually just taken the effort in general to do that. I appreciate it, at least. And I think it's really cool that they decided to even make that effort, because that's something they didn't even have to do, to be honest. They could have just put the game back out there and said, hey, look, guys, it's Titan Quest. Remember Titan Quest? And everyone would have said, yeah, and bought it. And that would have been fine. And, but they decided to put even more work in it than that. And I can only really appreciate that. So, another thing they've done is, not only have they rebalanced all the masteries and done a lot of item rebalancing as well, they've even improved the monster AI to make it a bit better. Because, let's be honest, AI in old games, not always the best. AI in modern games, not always the best, to be fair. They've also done things such as alter some kind of famous crashing and glitching that can happen in the vanilla game and its expansion. You will find it to be a more stable experience and a more reliably kind of non-crash-laden experience. That's not to say that Titan Quest was just phenomenally buggy or anything, but it definitely had its bug-ridden areas, and you'll find that a lot of those boss fights and areas are now a lot more stable. There are also, I think one of the most impressive things they were able to do, they've fully restored multiplayer functionality. You can play the multiplayer again. You don't need to use a LAN emulator like Hamachi or Tungle. You can just get on Steam and play the multiplayer through the game client and through Steam. Like, just like you normally would have back in 2006. You can just play it like that, and it works just fine. It uses normal, like, NAT server lag compensation and everything, and it works, like, totally fine, which is pretty cool. And, of course, there are tons and tons of Titan Quest veterans that are willing to teach you the ropes, and if you've never played the game before, this is a perfect opportunity to get in, because it's better than it's ever been. It's been polished up, it's been shored up along its rougher edges, and it's even got some new content. They've even added new items and weapons and things like that. Maybe even some new sets, I can't remember. Which, again, is effort that they didn't have to put in, but they decided to anyway, because they understand the general idea and the community around this game and how kind of much of a hardcore fan base Titan Quest actually had in general, and they did right by them because they understood how to do so and what it would get them to do that. Not only that, but if you had Titan Quest and Immortal Throne, the original version, in your Steam library, you get this version for free, which is a really good deal. It's hard to complain about a free game, especially one this well polished up and shored up. But if you do have to buy it, it's not going to run you very much. It's only $20. That's all it's going to cost you, and that is for everything. That's since Anniversary Edition includes both the game and its expansion, that's everything included in that $20, which is more than fair. And by the way, they have even included workshop support. So mods, the game is of course moddable, and a lot of people have been working on and have been successful at porting a lot of the larger and more popular Titan Quest mods to the Steam Workshop, and a lot of them are there. So you can just download them through the Workshop client and use them in-game right now, and they work. And they have been updated for this version as well, some of them. So really, this is quite a valuable and useful prospect for a lot of us that really enjoyed this game back in the day, and I enjoy being reminded of how good it was, because it's just as good as we remember, really. And for those of you who don't know the legacy of Iron Lore, well, you may have played one of their newer games. They're no longer called Iron Lore, but they're still around and they're still making action RPGs. This game is a bit of a prototype, you could say, almost, for a newer game. It's not exactly fair to say, because it's a very good game in its own right, but it does have elements of a different game in its DNA that has come out much more recently and is also very, very good, and I would recommend that you check out. So, for instance, if I go to the skill tree, you'll see it looks like this. You've got your Masteries here, and here. You gotta put points in them to raise this, to unlock different skills along this tree. That looks familiar, doesn't it? And you get named a certain thing depending on which mastery you're in. So, for instance, if you go into Storm Mastery, you're called a Stormcaller. If you go into Earth Mastery, you're called a Pyromancer. But if you go into both Storm and Earth, you're called an Elementalist. That system also sounds familiar. And you can also get these little monster charms and relic pieces, where they have a certain piece of equipment that they can enchant, and they are shards of themselves, to where if you get multiple of them, you can combine them together to make stronger versions of themselves, like that. And eventually, if you complete the set of them by, you know, combining all the pieces of them together, they actually have a completion bonus, and you can put them on a weapon to make it very strong. That also sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, you see, all of these systems are in a modern game, because Iron Lore, especially its main lead developer that was actually on this game, when they broke up, I guess you could say, they went on to form a different company called Crate Entertainment. And Crate Entertainment went on to make and release, very successfully, I might add, Grim Dawn. Grim Dawn has an absolutely fantastic action RPG. It's a very good example of this genre, and this game uses a lot of elements that you see in Grim Dawn, because the lead designer of this game is the same guy that makes Grim Dawn. They're the same company, just under a different name. A lot of the same people are in the studio. And also, I think a lot of people from 38 Studios, the guys that did Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, are in Crate Entertainment as well. But that's not relevant to what I'm talking about. So yeah, this is Titan Quest Anniversary Edition, and this harpy is just really not liking me. It is a wonderfully themed mythological action RPG, a romp through ancient times with a great amount of character development and variety in how you can actually build yourself, and you can also get murdered by harpies in the desert, like that. So, I'd recommend you give it a shot. You may find it for free in your library right now, and if not, it's only going to cost you $20 to go on an adventure, and it's quite a worthwhile adventure to go on, I feel. So, give it a try. I'll link you in the description below this video to the Steam store page. Do give it a look, because this is the kind of remake of old games that we should really be supporting, I think. In times where we see a lot of these that seem very half-assed and just kind of put out there for nostalgia's sake, with very little work put into them or effort towards actually appeasing the fans and more just for nostalgia bait, this actually has clear effort put into it towards realizing why fans of Titan Quest actually like it, why they are fans, and not just exploiting the fandom because it's there. And that's a practice that people should actually be proud of and be willing to support. So, yeah, that's my view on Titan Quest Anniversary Edition. I think it's a really good effort by THQNordic, and if this is the kind of thing they're going to be doing with THQ's IPs that they've gotten access to, then I'm very excited to see what they're going to come out with in the future. So, thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, then feel free to hit the like button. If you did not like it, then feel free to dislike the video and tell me why. That kind of feedback is quite valuable to me and helps me improve as a channel. And, I guess I'll see you guys next time.